I embarked on a solitary sojourn through the sprawling wilderness that enveloped our reservation. The crisp autumn air carried a faint fragrance of pine and sage, and the eerie howls of coyotes echoed through the moonlit groves. As night descended upon the land, casting ethereal shadows that contorted the familiar surroundings, I felt an inexplicable sense of unease creeping over me. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound broke the stillness of the forest. My heart skipped a beat as my senses heightened, alerting me to something amiss. I froze in my tracks, straining my ears to decipher the source of the disturbance. With each passing moment, the rustling grew louder, closer. A cold shiver ran down my spine as I realized that whatever was making the noise was moving steadily toward me. Slowly, I drew an arrow from my quiver and notched it onto the bowstring, my hands trembling slightly. My eyes scanned the undergrowth frantically, searching for any sign of life. The rustling intensified, and I saw something large and shadowy emerge from the darkness. It was a towering figure, draped in a flowing robe that seemed to shimmer and shift in the moonlight. Its skin was pale as chalk, and its eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity. Was this a human, or something else entirely? A wave of terror swept over me as I realized that the creature was staring directly at me. Its lips parted, revealing rows of sharp, glistening teeth, and a guttural growl escaped its throat. Fear propelled me backward as I stumbled over a fallen log, the arrow dropping from my grasp. The creature advanced relentlessly, its movements fluid and predatory. It crouched low, its claws scraping against the ground as it prepared to pounce. In a desperate attempt to escape, I scrambled to my feet and ran as fast as my legs would carry me. My breath came in ragged gasps as I dodged through the dense undergrowth, the sound of the creature's pursuit echoing behind me. I could feel its hot breath on my neck, and the terror that gripped my heart seemed to paralyze me. As I ran, I stumbled and fell heavily, my body aching from the impact. The creature lunged at me, its claws inches from my face. I screamed in terror, but it was too late. The jagged talons raked across my cheek, leaving a deep, throbbing gash. Blood seeped from the wound, and I felt a surge of pain that radiated through my entire body. With renewed desperation, I kicked out at the creature, connecting with its leg. It howled in agony and stumbled backward, giving me just enough time to scramble to my feet and continue my flight. I ran as if my life depended on it, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for respite. I knew not where I was running, only that I had to get away from the relentless pursuit of that monstrous creature. Hours turned into an eternity as I stumbled through the unfamiliar terrain, guided only by the dim glow of the moon and the primal instinct that drove me to survive. Finally, as the first rays of dawn pierced through the canopy, I collapsed on the ground, exhausted and battered. As I lay there, panting and bleeding, I realized that I had lost my way. I was alone in the wilderness, injured and vulnerable. Fear gnawed at my mind, and I knew that if I did not find help soon, I would surely perish. With newfound resolve, I rose to my feet and stumbled forward, determined to find my way back to safety. As I walked, I encountered signs that I was moving closer to civilization. The trees thinned, and I could hear the distant sound of a river. I stumbled down a steep ravine and crossed a narrow wooden bridge that spanned a raging torrent. Finally, I reached the outskirts of my village. The people welcomed me back with open arms, but the horrors I had witnessed that night would haunt me for the rest of my days. I told them of the creature I had encountered, but they looked at me with a mix of disbelief and concern. Some whispered that it was a malevolent spirit, a shape-shifter that preyed upon the unwary. Others dismissed my story as a nightmare, a tale born of fear and exhaustion. But I knew what I had seen. It was not a human, nor was it a simple animal. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent that lurked within the shadows, waiting for its next victim. And I knew that I would never venture into the wilderness alone again. In the heart of the urban jungle, amidst the hustle and bustle of city life, stood a colossal edifice that housed the halls of a university. Within its labyrinthine depths, my friend and I embarked on an extraordinary adventure that would forever etch itself into our memories. The building's facade gave no hint of the hidden secrets that lay beneath its towering exterior. Its inconspicuous entrance led to the fourth floor, as marked by the signage, while the floors below remained obscured, bathed in the ethereal glow of interior courtyards. Curiosity gnawed at our minds as we glimpsed the shadowy depths through the courtyard windows. One day, driven by an insatiable desire to unravel the enigma, we surreptitiously slipped through a window into the uncharted basement. As we ventured deeper, we discovered a forgotten realm, a repository of antiquated equipment frozen in time. The air was thick with the scent of history, whispering tales of a past filled with scientific endeavors. As we explored the shadowy depths, our senses were heightened. We stumbled upon a staircase leading down to an even deeper level, a realm of towering supports that bore the weight of the massive machinery above. Scattered around were vast storage areas filled with aging coal, remnants of a bygone era. In the midst of this subterranean labyrinth, we encountered a peculiar sight, a large tool shed standing isolated in the cavernous space. A wave of trepidation mingled with excitement washed over us. We were trespassers in an unknown territory, our every step echoing in the silence. With cautious hands, we carefully pried away a solitary nailed-down board, revealing the top of a spiral staircase descending into the unknown. At that moment, we found ourselves 5 stories underground, hidden from the world above. A sense of exhilaration and trepidation surged through our veins. We squeezed through the narrow opening and began our descent into the unknown. The metal steps groaned and creaked beneath our feet, carrying with them a haunting symphony of time. As we ventured deeper into the subterranean maze, my friend in the lead suddenly halted and uttered a hushed, "Back up." Now. A chill ran down my spine as he recounted what he had witnessed. The bottom of the staircase seemed to be consumed by rust, its metal frame crumbling into oblivion. A murky hallway filled with water lay before us, its depths shrouded in mystery. A sense of unease settled over me, but my curiosity refused to be quenched. Determined to unravel the secrets hidden in the depths, I ventured down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. To my astonishment, the scene was even stranger than my friend had described. Hovering upside down in the murky water below the staircase was an ancient bell system hard hat, its lifeless form a haunting reminder of the untold stories that these walls held. As I gazed into the water, a faint movement caught my eye. A ripple appeared on the surface, spreading outward like a silent message from the depths. It could have been a mere disturbance caused by our presence, or it could have been the subtle stirring of something unseen lurking beneath the water's surface. At that moment, fear replaced curiosity within us. With a shared sense of urgency, we hastily ascended the rickety staircase, our footsteps echoing in the eerie silence. As we emerged from the darkness, we couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen had been watching us from the depths of that forgotten realm. The basement we had stumbled upon stood as a testament to a bygone era, a hidden world frozen in time. The strange encounters we had experienced left an indelible mark on our minds, forever entwined with the labyrinthine depths beneath the bustling city streets. In the waning dusk of a summer evening, as the shadows grew long and the air grew heavy with the scent of ripened corn, I found myself drawn to the labyrinthine paths that cut through the towering rows of a sprawling cornfield. It was a scene of tranquil beauty, yet an undercurrent of unease stirred within me, a nagging sense that I was not truly alone. As I ventured deeper into the cornfield, the stalks seemed to close in around me like grasping fingers, their leaves rustling ominously in the gentle breeze. The rows of corn stretched out endlessly before me, forming a disorienting maze that made it difficult to discern my surroundings. I began to feel a growing sense of paranoia, every sound seeming amplified in the eerie silence. The slightest creak of a cornstalk startled me, and I jumped at the sound of a distant bird call. My imagination ran wild, conjuring up all manner of horrors that might be lurking just out of sight. Suddenly, I noticed movement out of the corner of my eye. A flicker of something white in the distance. My heart pounded in my chest as I cautiously approached, my every nerve on high alert. As I drew closer, I realized it was a piece of clothing, a torn and tattered shirt. It was lying in the middle of a clearing, surrounded by trampled cornstalks. A chill ran down my spine as I imagined what might have happened here. I bent down to examine the shirt, hoping to find some clue that could lead me to its owner. But it was old and faded, and there were no markings or identifying features. All I could discern was that it was a man's shirt. A sudden noise from behind me made me whirl around, my heart pounding like a drum. I scanned my surroundings, but there was nothing to be seen. The clearing was once again empty, save for the torn shirt and the oppressive silence that seemed to smother me. I felt a wave of panic rising within me. I had to get out of there, away from the cornfield and whatever unseen horrors might be lurking within its depths. With trembling hands I turned and ran, my legs pumping furiously. I stumbled through the rows of corn, desperate to escape the confines of that cursed place. My thoughts were racing, my mind conjuring up all manner of terrible scenarios. I could feel my lungs burning with exertion, each breath a desperate gasp for air. Finally, I reached the edge of the cornfield and stumbled out into a clearing. I collapsed on the grass, gasping for breath and trying to calm my racing heart. As I lay there, exhausted and terrified, I heard a faint sound that sent shivers down my spine. Footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, approaching from the cornfield behind me. I froze, my body trembling with fear. The footsteps grew louder, closer, and then they stopped a few feet away from where I lay. I could feel the presence of something behind me, watching me, its breath warm on the back of my neck. I dared not move, for fear of provoking whatever it was that had found me. The footsteps continued, circling around me like a predator stalking its prey. I could hear its ragged breathing, its heavy tread sending vibrations through the ground. For what felt like an eternity, it remained there, its presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked nearby. And then, as silently as it had appeared, it was gone. The footsteps faded away into the distance, leaving me alone in the fading light. I lay there for a long time, unmoving, my body still trembling with fear. Slowly, I gathered my wits and stood up, my legs weak and unsteady. I knew I had to get out of there. I had to find help. With newfound determination, I stumbled back into the cornfield, navigating the rows with difficulty. The darkness had grown even thicker, and the shadows seemed to dance and twist, taking on sinister shapes that made my heart race even faster. I walked for what seemed like hours, my feet pounding against the uneven ground. Fear propelled me forward, each step a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of whatever it was that had been stalking me. Finally, I emerged from the cornfield and staggered into a road. I hailed the first car that passed by and begged for help. The driver, a kind elderly woman, took one look at my face and knew that something terrible had happened. She drove me to the nearest police station, where I gave a statement about my terrifying encounter in the cornfield. The police searched the area but found no sign of my pursuer, leaving me with the haunting feeling that I had escaped by the skin of my teeth. In the days and weeks that followed, I couldn't shake the memory of what had happened. I kept seeing the torn shirt, the menacing footsteps, and the darkness that seemed to close in around me. I became afraid to be alone, afraid to go out in public, afraid that whatever had been hunting me in the cornfield would find me again. I sought help from a therapist, who diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Together, we worked through the trauma of that night, and slowly but surely, I began to heal. I never forgot what happened to me in the cornfield, but I learned to live with it. I learned to trust my instincts and to listen to my fears. And I learned that even in the darkest of times, I am not truly alone. There are people who care about me, who will always be there for me, no matter what. And even though the memory of that night will always be with me, it does not define me. Youthful indiscretion, the reckless pursuit of pleasure, the allure of forbidden fruit, all of these had ensnared me in their treacherous web. It was a summer evening, heavy with humidity and the promise of rain. The sun was beginning its descent, casting long shadows across the parched earth. As I stood at the threshold of my desires, I couldn't help but feel a surge of exhilaration mingled with trepidation. The object of my affection was Sarah, a radiant young woman whose beauty was as captivating as it was forbidden. She was the daughter of a wealthy and influential family, and our clandestine relationship was a source of both intense excitement and peril. We had stolen precious moments together, hidden from prying eyes. But I knew that our affair could never last. On that fateful evening, we had arranged to meet at a secluded spot by the river, a place where we could escape the watchful gaze of society. As I approached the rendezvous point, my heart pounded with anticipation. I yearned for the stolen kisses, the tender embraces, and the forbidden ecstasy that awaited me. As I rounded a bend in the path, I saw Sarah's slender frame silhouetted against the fading light. She was waiting for me, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of desire and anxiety. In that moment, time seemed to stand still as we fell into each other's arms. We kissed, our lips meeting with a desperate fervor that reflected the intensity of our forbidden affair. Her body pressed against mine, sending shivers down my spine. I felt an overwhelming sense of possession, as if I had finally claimed something that was rightfully mine. But our stolen moments of bliss were soon interrupted by an unexpected sound. Footsteps approached from behind, and we quickly parted ways. Fear gnawed at my heart as I realized that we had been discovered. In a panic, we fled into the dense undergrowth, desperate to evade our pursuers. Thorns tore at our clothing, and the sound of our own footsteps echoed through the silent forest. As we stumbled through the darkness, I could hear the voices of men drawing closer. My mind raced, searching for a way out of this perilous situation. I couldn't allow Sarah to be caught in my web of deceit. With a heavy heart, I whispered words of desperation into her ear, begging her to flee while she still had the chance. Tears streamed down her face as she looked at me with eyes filled with love and fear. "I can't leave you," she sobbed. "I won't abandon you." In that brief moment, I realized the true depth of her affection for me. She was willing to sacrifice her own safety for my sake. But I couldn't let her do that. Summoning all my strength, I gently pushed her away, urging her to run. As she disappeared into the darkness, a sense of guilt and despair washed over me. I had led her into this dangerous game, and now I was forcing her to face the consequences alone. I couldn't bear the thought of what might happen to her if she were caught. Desperate to protect her, I decided to take the blame upon myself. As the men approached, I stepped out from my hiding place, my arms raised in surrender. They were surprised to find me alone, but they didn't hesitate to seize me. I was roughly handcuffed and led away, my mind reeling from the consequences of my actions. As I was marched through the streets, heads turned in curiosity and judgment. I felt the weight of my shame as the realization dawned upon me that I had not only betrayed Sarah but also myself. The days turned into nights as I languished in a cold, dark cell. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of the metal door and the sound of my own ragged breathing. I had time to reflect on my past actions, and the guilt and regret consumed me. I thought about Sarah, wondering what had become of her. I prayed that she had managed to escape and that she was safe from harm. I knew that I could never see her again, but I would carry her in my heart forever. Eventually, I was brought to trial. The evidence against me was overwhelming, and I was found guilty of several charges, including statutory rape and indecent exposure. I was sentenced to 5 years in prison. As I was led away to begin my sentence, I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. I had paid the price for my youthful indiscretion, and perhaps I deserved the punishment that had befallen me. Inside the prison walls, I found myself among a hardened group of men who had committed far more heinous crimes than I had. At first I was terrified, but over time I came to see them as my brothers in misfortune. We shared our stories, our hopes, and our fears. We learned from each other's mistakes, and we supported each other through the darkest of times. It was through these shared experiences that I began to find a glimmer of redemption. I worked hard, I educated myself, and I became a mentor to the younger inmates. I dedicated my life to atoning for my past actions and to helping others avoid the pitfalls that had ensnared me. After serving my full sentence, I was released from prison. I was a changed man, determined to make amends for the wrongs I had committed. I returned to my hometown, where I sought out Sarah and apologized for the pain I had caused her. To my surprise, she had forgiven me. She told me that she had never stopped loving me, and that she understood the desperation that had driven me to our forbidden affair. Together, we began a new chapter in our lives. We were no longer the reckless teenagers who had sought forbidden pleasures. We were adults, scarred by our past experiences, but determined to build a future filled with love, forgiveness, and redemption. My story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of youthful indiscretion and the importance of making choices that align with our values. It is a story about the power of redemption and the human capacity for forgiveness. And it is a story about the transformative power of love, which can conquer even the darkest of pasts. In the tapestry of my life, the night my slumbering son uttered those chilling words forever cast a sinister thread, plunging me into a labyrinth of terror and unease. It was a night that shattered my perception of reality and left me questioning the very fabric of my existence. My son Ethan had always been a peaceful sleeper, his nights filled with gentle snores and the occasional murmur. But one fateful evening, as I tucked him in for the night, his behavior took an unsettling turn. His eyes, normally bright and full of life, glazed over, and his body became rigid. I watched in growing concern as he sat up in bed, his movements mechanical. To my horror, Ethan's lips parted, and words flowed out in a monotone voice, as if spoken by a stranger. "I see her," he whispered, his voice eerily devoid of emotion. "She's standing right there, in the doorway." My heart sank as I realized my son was sleepwalking. In the past, his nocturnal wanderings had been harmless, but this was different. There was a sinister undercurrent to his words, a chilling familiarity that made my blood run cold. Who was this she he spoke of? Why couldn't I see her? A wave of panic washed over me as I frantically scanned the room, desperate to dispel the phantom that haunted my son's dreams. As the night wore on, Ethan's utterances became increasingly disturbing. He described a woman with long, flowing hair and piercing blue eyes, her presence both alluring and terrifying. He spoke of her beckoning him to follow her, to leave the safety of his bed and venture into the unknown. Fear gnawed at my core as I listened to my son's words, the tapestry of reality unraveling before my very eyes. The line between waking and dreaming blurred, and I began to wonder if the phantom Ethan saw was merely a figment of his sleep-addled mind, or a terrifying glimpse into a realm beyond my comprehension. Determined to shed light on this sinister mystery, I purchased a baby monitor, hoping to capture Ethan's nocturnal conversations. Night after night, I placed the monitor by his bedside, its faint glow casting an eerie illumination on his sleeping form. And then it happened. As the clock ticked past midnight, Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and his voice echoed through the monitor, sending a shiver down my spine. "She's here," he whispered, his voice barely above a breath. "She's waiting for me." A surge of adrenaline coursed through me as I rushed to his room, heart pounding like a drum. The door was slightly ajar, and a faint breeze carried the scent of lilacs into the room. I peered inside, my eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of the enigmatic woman Ethan spoke of. But there was nothing. The room was empty, save for Ethan, who lay motionless in his bed, his eyes closed once more. Had the phantom vanished into thin air? Or had I imagined it all? As the days turned into weeks, Ethan's sleepwalking episodes continued, each night punctuated by chilling conversations with the unseen woman. He spoke of their secret meetings, their whispered promises, and the growing bond that drew him to her. And still, I could not see her. I began to doubt my own sanity, questioning whether the phantom was real or merely a manifestation of my own fears. Sleep eluded me, replaced by an ever-present sense of dread. Desperate for answers, I sought the help of a sleep specialist. Dr. Emily Carter listened intently to my account of Ethan's sleepwalking and the enigmatic woman he spoke of. After reviewing the recordings from the baby monitor, she proposed a theory that both terrified and fascinated me. "Based on the descriptions your son has given," Dr. Carter explained, her voice solemn, "it's possible that he is experiencing a rare form of sleep paralysis known as intruder hallucinations." She went on to explain that intruder hallucinations are vivid, dreamlike experiences that occur during the transition between sleep and wakefulness. Sufferers often report seeing shadowy figures or otherworldly beings in their room, accompanied by a sense of overwhelming dread. According to Dr. Carter, Ethan's sleepwalking episodes were likely triggered by the onset of intruder hallucinations. The phantom woman he spoke of was a manifestation of his own fear and anxiety, a projection of his subconscious mind into the waking world. While Dr. Carter's theory provided some solace, it did not dispel the terror that had taken root in my heart. The thought of my son being haunted by his own imagination, of living in a world where the boundaries between reality and hallucination blurred, filled me with unspeakable dread. Determined to protect my son from whatever horrors lurked in his dreams, I installed a security camera in his room. Night after night, I watched over him as he slept, the flickering light of the camera my only companion in the darkness. And then, one night it happened. As the clock struck 2, Ethan's eyes shot open, and his body trembled violently. I watched in horror as he sat up in bed, his face contorted in a mask of terror. "She's here!" he screamed, his voice filled with unbearable anguish. "She's right behind me." I rushed to his side, but before I could reach him, something incredible occurred. The phantom woman, the unseen entity that had haunted my son for weeks, materialized before my very eyes. It was a moment that defied all logic and reason. A shimmering figure, ethereal and otherworldly, stood hovering over Ethan's bed. Its long, flowing hair cascaded over its shoulders, and its piercing blue eyes seemed to glow with an eerie intensity. Time seemed to slow down as I stared at the phantom, its presence both terrifying and oddly familiar. In that fleeting instant, I realized that I had seen her before, in my own dreams. She was the woman who had haunted my nightmares for as long as I could remember, her presence a constant source of unease and foreboding. But how was this possible? How could the phantom from my own dreams have manifested itself in my son's room? A cold shiver ran down my spine as a terrifying possibility dawned on me. Could it be that the phantom was not a figment of our imaginations at all, but rather an entity that existed in some ethereal realm, capable of crossing the boundaries between dreams and reality? A being that had chosen to torment both my son and myself, using our innermost fears as its playthings? As the phantom reached out a delicate hand towards Ethan, I was filled with an overwhelming sense of dread. I knew that if it touched him, something irreparable would happen. Desperation surged through me as I lunged forward, determined to protect my son from whatever horrors this entity held. I grabbed the phantom's hand and pulled it away from Ethan with all my strength. The room was filled with a blinding flash of light, and a deafening scream echoed through the house. When the light subsided, the phantom was gone, and so was Ethan. The bed was empty, and there was no trace of my son anywhere to be found. A wave of panic washed over me as I frantically searched the house, calling out Ethan's name. But he was nowhere to be seen. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. As the sun rose, casting a pale glow over the shattered remnants of my world, I was left with a profound sense of loss and confusion. Had the phantom taken my son? Or had something far more sinister occurred? Time became my enemy, each passing hour torturing me with uncertainty and despair. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had somehow failed my son, that I had allowed an unseen force to steal him away from me. The days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of Ethan. I clung to the hope that he was alive, that he would find his way back to me. But as the weeks stretched into months, that hope began to dwindle. I sought solace in therapy, desperate to make sense of the nightmare that had consumed my life. My therapist listened patiently to my account of Ethan's sleepwalking, the phantom woman, and my son's eventual disappearance. Together, we explored the depths of my own psyche, searching for any hidden traumas or subconscious fears that might have contributed to this surreal turn of events. But no answers were forthcoming. I was left alone with my grief and the gnawing question of what had happened to my beloved son. And then, one night, I had a dream. It was a vivid, lucid dream, unlike anything I had ever experienced before. In my dream, I found myself standing in a vast, featureless void. Darkness enveloped me, suffocating and impenetrable. Suddenly, a faint flicker of light appeared in the distance. It grew brighter and brighter until it consumed my entire field of vision. And then I saw her. The phantom woman floated before me, her ethereal presence shimmering with an otherworldly glow. Her eyes, once filled with malice, now held a look of profound sadness. "I am sorry," she whispered, her voice a mere echo in the vastness of space. "I did not mean to take him from you. He was—" Her voice trailed off, and her form began to dissolve into the darkness. "Ethan!" I gasped, my voice trembling with a mix of hope and trepidation. "What happened to him?" "He is safe," she replied, her voice barely audible. "He is with me now." And with those words, she vanished, leaving me alone in the suffocating darkness. I awoke from my dream bathed in a cold sweat, my heart pounding in my chest. The words of the phantom woman echoed in my mind, filling me with a strange mix of relief and dread. Ethan was safe, she had said, but what did that mean? Where was he, and why had she taken him? Determined to find answers, I delved deeper into the mystery that had consumed my life. I combed through old books and obscure folklore, searching for any mention of beings that could traverse the realm between dreams and reality. And then I found it. Buried deep within the pages of an ancient tome, I discovered a legend that spoke of a race of ethereal beings known as dreamweavers. According to the legend, dreamweavers were guardians of the dream realm, tasked with maintaining the delicate balance between dreams and reality. But something had gone awry. A rift had formed between the dream realm and the waking world, allowing malevolent entities to slip through and wreak havoc on unsuspecting dreamers. The dreamweavers, it seemed, were fighting a losing battle to contain the chaos. My heart raced as I pieced together the fragments of the puzzle. The phantom woman, with her shimmering form and piercing blue eyes, was undoubtedly a dreamweaver. And Ethan had somehow become entangled in her struggle to protect the dream realm. But why had she taken him? And what did it mean for his fate? Armed with newfound knowledge, I delved deeper into the dream realm, determined to find a way to rescue my son. Night after night, I traversed the shifting landscapes of dreams, searching for any sign of Ethan or the phantom woman. And then, one fateful night, I found them. Ethan stood before me, his eyes wide with wonder as he gazed upon the surreal landscape that surrounded us. And beside him stood the phantom woman, her form radiant in the ethereal glow of the dream realm. "You came," Ethan exclaimed, his voice filled with joy. "I knew you would." I rushed to his side, wrapping him in a tight embrace. Tears of relief streamed down my cheeks as I held my son, the weight of months of uncertainty lifting from my shoulders. But even as I clung to Ethan, a sense of foreboding lingered in the air. The dream realm was a perilous place, fraught with dangers beyond imagining. And though I had found my son, I knew that our journey was far from over. Together, we stood on the precipice of a world unlike any we had ever known, our destinies intertwined with those of the dreamweavers who guarded its secrets. And as we prepared to face the challenges that lay ahead, I knew that whatever trials awaited us, we would face them together, bound by a love that transcended even the boundaries of dreams and reality. In a world where corporate hierarchies and professional boundaries often intertwined, I found myself entangled in a web of intrigue and temptation. My name is Emily, and I was a promising young executive at a renowned financial firm. Fate took an unexpected turn when my enigmatic boss, the enigmatic Mr. Anderson, extended an enigmatic invitation to a series of secret parties. Little did I know that these gatherings would forever alter the course of my career and my personal life. Mr. Anderson, a charismatic figure with piercing blue eyes and an air of quiet authority, had been my mentor for a few months. He had guided me expertly through the complexities of the industry, and I had come to admire his sharp mind and unwavering determination. However, beneath that polished exterior, I sensed a streak of mystery that intrigued me. One evening, after a particularly successful project launch, Mr. Anderson called me into his office. His tone was unusually casual, and there was a hint of mischief in his eyes. "Emily, I've been watching your work lately, and I'm very impressed with your progress," he began. I'd like to invite you to join a small group of select employees for a series of private gatherings. Curiosity mingled with apprehension as I hesitated. Private gatherings, sir? Yes, he replied, his lips curving into an enigmatic smile. These are not your typical office parties. They're more exclusive, more intimate. A moment of silence stretched between us. I weighed the potential benefits against the risks. On one hand, this could be an opportunity to network with the firm's top brass and fast-track my career. On the other hand, something about the invitation felt unorthodox. What are these gatherings like exactly? I asked. Mr. Anderson leaned back in his chair, his gaze steady. Let's just say they're a way for us to unwind, to escape the pressures of work. There will be fine dining, exquisite wines, and stimulating conversation. He paused. Of course, discretion is paramount. These gatherings are strictly confidential. Intrigue got the better of me. I had never been one for wild parties or scandalous behavior, but the prospect of a glimpse into this hidden world was too tempting to resist. I'm intrigued, I said. I'll join. Mr. Anderson smiled, a hint of satisfaction in his eyes. Excellent. I'll send you the details shortly. Days later, I received an email with the time and location of the first gathering. It was scheduled to take place in a private penthouse suite overlooking the city skyline. I dressed meticulously, my heart pounding with anticipation. Upon arriving at the venue, I was greeted by Mr. Anderson and a handful of other guests. To my surprise, they were all senior executives from various departments within the firm. The atmosphere was charged with a sense of exclusivity and secrecy. As the evening progressed, I found myself caught up in the whirlwind of luxury and indulgence. The food was delectable, the wine exquisite. The conversation flowed effortlessly from business strategy to art and philosophy. I had never felt so stimulated, so connected to my colleagues. But amidst the revelry, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. As the night wore on, the boundaries between professional and personal seemed to blur. Jokes became more risque, laughter more raucous. It was then that I noticed Mr. Anderson's gaze lingering on me a little too long. His usual professional demeanor had dissolved, replaced by something more predatory. Unnerved, I excused myself to the restroom. As I washed my hands, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to find Mr. Anderson standing in the doorway, his eyes smoldering. Emily, he murmured, his voice husky. You look ravishing tonight. His words sent a shiver down my spine. I had never thought of myself as attractive, but in that moment, I felt a strange allure. Thank you, I stammered, unsure how to respond. He stepped closer, his breath warm on my neck. I've been wanting to tell you something, he whispered. I find you intoxicating. I want you. Shock coursed through me. I had never considered Mr. Anderson in a romantic light. He was my boss, my mentor, a man I respected and admired. Mr. Anderson, I said, trying to maintain my composure. This is not appropriate. His eyes narrowed. It's not appropriate? He repeated, his voice laced with a hint of bitterness. Don't act so innocent, Emily. I know you've been enjoying these gatherings. You've been enjoying my company. I couldn't deny it. There was an undeniable chemistry between us, a dangerous attraction that was both alluring and terrifying. I admitted. But that doesn't mean that. That doesn't mean you can resist me? He interrupted, his voice low and menacing. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. Let me go, I whispered. He laughed softly. Not until you give me what I want. My heart pounded in my chest. I had never been in a situation like this before. I had always been in control of my own body, my own desires. But in that moment, I felt powerless against Mr. Anderson's will. With a heavy heart, I succumbed to his demands. I had crossed a line, and there was no going back. As the night continued, I felt a sense of shame and betrayal wash over me. I had violated the trust of my colleagues and compromised my own integrity. The secret parties became a regular occurrence, and with each gathering, I found myself sinking deeper into a moral quagmire. The line between professional and personal had become irrevocably blurred, and I could no longer ignore the consequences of my actions. Rumors and whispers began to circulate around the office. People started to notice the close relationship between Mr. Anderson and me. Some were envious, others were judgmental. And then, one fateful day, everything came crashing down. An anonymous email was sent to the firm's compliance department, detailing the illicit activities taking place at the secret parties. An investigation was launched, and soon, the truth was laid bare. Mr. Anderson was fired, along with several other senior executives. I was spared termination, but my reputation was irrevocably damaged. The fallout was swift and severe. I lost the respect of my colleagues and the trust of my superiors. My career prospects were shattered, and I found myself isolated and alone. In the aftermath of the scandal, I struggled to rebuild my life. I sought therapy to work through the emotional turmoil I had endured. I volunteered at a local charity to try to atone for my past mistakes. It took years of hard work and self-reflection to finally put the pieces of my life back together. I found a new job in a different industry, where I could start over with a clean slate. Looking back on that dark chapter in my life, I feel a mix of regret and gratitude. Regret for the choices I made, and gratitude for the lessons I learned. The secret parties were a seductive illusion, a dangerous game that ultimately led to my downfall. But they also taught me the importance of integrity, the power of choice, and the resilience of the human spirit. And so, with a heavy heart and a newfound wisdom, I share my story as a cautionary tale. For in the pursuit of power, ambition, and desire, it is all too easy to lose sight of what truly matters. I have chosen a path less traveled. I am a realtor who exclusively sells haunted houses. This unique niche may raise eyebrows and send shivers down the spines of the uninitiated, but for me, it's a fascinating and profoundly personal journey. From a young age, I've been drawn to the ethereal and the unexplained. I devoured stories of ghosts and haunted dwellings, finding myself both captivated and terrified by their enigmatic existence. As I grew older, this fascination transformed into an unquenchable thirst to explore the unknown, leading me down the extraordinary path that I now tread. My first encounter with the paranormal occurred during a visit to an old Victorian mansion. As I stepped through the creaky threshold, an inexplicable coldness enveloped me, sending goosebumps across my skin. The air crackled with an uncanny energy, and I felt an overwhelming sense of being watched. Despite the unsettling atmosphere, I was inexplicably drawn to the house. I wandered through its sunless corridors, my heart pounding in my chest. In a dusty sitting room, I stumbled upon a lifelike portrait of a young woman, her eyes seeming to follow me with an eerie intensity. As I gazed at her haunting portrait, a whisper brushed against my ear. "You can see me," it said. I gasped in surprise, my mind reeling from the impossible. I turned to face the source of the voice but found only an empty room. Fear and exhilaration coursed through me in equal measure. I had just had an encounter with an otherworldly being, and it had spoken to me. In the years that followed, I continued to visit haunted houses, drawn by an insatiable curiosity. I witnessed unexplainable phenomena, heard disembodied voices, and felt the icy touch of ghostly apparitions. Each encounter deepened my understanding of the paranormal realm and strengthened my resolve to share the secrets that lay hidden within these haunted dwellings. Realizing the potential of my unique experiences, I decided to become a realtor who exclusively sold haunted houses. I knew that this would be a challenging path, as many people are terrified of the paranormal, but I was determined to find clients who shared my passion for the unknown. To my surprise, I quickly gained a reputation as the haunted house realtor. Clients from all walks of life sought my services, seeking to purchase properties that were steeped in mystery and intrigue. Some were paranormal enthusiasts who longed to experience the thrill of living in a haunted home, while others were seeking a connection to the beyond. One of my most memorable clients was a young woman named Emily. She was fascinated by the paranormal and had always dreamed of living in a haunted house. Emily had purchased an old farmhouse that was rumored to be the site of a tragic murder. As soon as Emily moved into the farmhouse, she began to experience strange phenomena. Doors would open and close on their own, footsteps would echo through the empty halls, and she would often hear a woman crying in the attic. Emily was initially terrified, but she refused to let fear drive her away. With my guidance, Emily cautiously explored the paranormal activity in her home. Together, we conducted investigations, using electronic equipment to capture evidence of the unseen. To Emily's delight, we eventually established contact with the ghost of the murdered woman, who revealed that she had been seeking justice for her untimely demise. Emily and the ghost formed an unlikely bond. Emily learned the woman's tragic story and promised to help her find peace. Through her unwavering determination and compassion, Emily was able to bring closure to the restless spirit and create a harmonious coexistence between the living and the dead. As I witnessed Emily's extraordinary journey, I realized that haunted houses are not just about ghosts and paranormal phenomena. They are repositories of history, secrets, and untold stories. By living in these haunted dwellings, people have the opportunity to connect with the past, unravel mysteries, and experience the extraordinary. One evening, I received a call from a desperate man named John. He had purchased a house that was rumored to be haunted by a malevolent spirit. John and his family had endured months of terror, sleepless nights, and unexplained disturbances. The spirit had become increasingly aggressive, threatening their safety and peace of mind. Arriving at John's house, I immediately sensed the malevolent energy that pervaded the atmosphere. The air was heavy with fear, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. As I entered the house, I heard a guttural growl coming from the basement. John led me downstairs, his hands trembling. We cautiously approached a locked door, behind which the growling noises became even more menacing. Taking a deep breath, John unlocked the door, and we stepped inside. The basement was pitch black, the only illumination coming from a faint glow emanating from an old grandfather clock. As our eyes adjusted to the darkness, we made a shocking discovery. In the corner of the room, chained to the wall, was a human skeleton. Fear surged through me as I realized that the skeleton was the source of the malevolent energy. It appeared to be possessed by an evil spirit, trapped in this realm and seeking revenge. John and I knew that we had to act quickly to free his family from this terrifying entity. Together, we called upon our combined knowledge of paranormal phenomena and devised a plan to exorcise the spirit. We gathered sacred objects, candles, and incense, and prepared ourselves for a night of confrontation. As darkness enveloped the house, we entered the basement once more. The atmosphere was now charged with an ominous energy. We placed the sacred objects around the skeleton and lit the candles, their flickering light casting an eerie glow. With trembling hands, we began to chant ancient incantations, invoking the power of good to banish the evil spirit. As we spoke the words, the skeleton began to jerk and rattle violently. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and a voice filled the room, filled with rage and despair. Undeterred, we continued our chanting, our voices rising above the cacophony of evil. Slowly but surely, the spirit's resistance weakened. The skeleton ceased its erratic movements, and the foul stench dissipated. As the last words of the incantation were spoken, a blinding light filled the basement. The skeleton shattered into dust, and the malevolent spirit was finally vanquished. John and his family were finally free from the terror that had haunted them for months. In the aftermath of the exorcism, John and his family expressed their gratitude for our help. They had endured unimaginable horrors, but through our combined efforts, they had regained their peace of mind and the safety of their home. As I left their house, I realized that my role as a haunted house realtor was not simply about selling properties. It was about helping people navigate the extraordinary, overcoming their fears, and finding peace in the face of the unknown. Over the years, I have sold countless haunted houses, each with its own unique story and enigmatic secrets. I have witnessed exorcisms, conducted investigations, and counseled clients who have had life-changing encounters with the paranormal. Haunted houses are more than just dwellings for the living, they are portals to the unknown, where the boundaries between the living and the dead blur. By embracing the extraordinary and seeking to understand the mysteries that lie hidden within these haunted dwellings, we open ourselves up to a realm of possibility that transcends the mundane and the ordinary. I am eternally grateful for the journey that has led me to this unique and extraordinary profession. As a realtor of haunted houses, I have had the privilege of witnessing firsthand the power of the unknown and the resilience of the human spirit. Whether comforting clients who are terrified of the paranormal or helping them to embrace the extraordinary, I am committed to sharing the secrets that lie hidden within the shadows and guiding others on their own extraordinary journeys. In the depths of subterranean corridors, where coal seams lay hidden and darkness enveloped every crevice, I embarked on a peculiar assignment as a technical assistant at a coal mining company. My role was akin to that of an indentured servant, carrying out the mundane tasks that paved the path for those with scholarly credentials. Among these duties was the solitary venture into the labyrinthine underground mines, where I collected samples of coal, dirt, and air, often venturing far from the watchful gaze of my fellow workers. One particular location within the mine's vast expanse filled me with an inexplicable dread. It was a secluded spot, marked by nothing more than a pile of mining equipment and the faint hum of machinery in the distance. Yet, each time I ventured into its vicinity, a sensation of unease gripped me, as if an unseen presence was lurking just behind my shoulder. The whispering began subtly, barely perceptible above the faint creaks and groans of the mine. It was a murmur, a whisper carried on the breath of wind that seemed to seep from the walls themselves. At first, I dismissed it as mere acoustics, the byproduct of the mine's intricate network of tunnels and chambers. But as the whispers intensified, transforming into incoherent syllables that danced on the edge of my hearing, a sense of dread washed over me. I would pause in my work, my heart pounding in my chest, as the whispers grew louder. They seemed to originate from my left side, following me as I moved through the desolate expanse. The sensation was so real that I could almost feel the warm breath of an unseen companion on my neck. I would turn my head, scanning the darkness, but there was never anyone there. Time seemed to stand still as the whispers continued, their cadence matching the rhythm of my own heartbeat. A cold sweat broke out upon my forehead, and my hands trembled as I struggled to maintain my composure. Rationality fought against the fear that gnawed at my mind, but the relentless whispering proved too unsettling to ignore. On one particularly harrowing occasion, the whispers transformed into something more sinister. They took on a menacing tone, as if spoken by a voice steeped in malice. The words were indistinct, lost in a torrent of broken syllables, but the intent behind them was unmistakable. It was a voice that whispered of violence, of pain, of terror. Panic surged through me, and I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the oppressive presence. My foot caught on a loose cable, and I fell heavily, the cold, damp ground pressing against my skin. The whispering ceased abruptly, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of the mine. I lay there for a long moment, shivering not from the cold but from the lingering fear that had gripped me. Slowly, I gathered my senses and climbed to my feet. The whispering had vanished, but the memory of it lingered like a dark shadow. From that day forward, I could not shake the feeling that something malevolent resided within the depths of that particular mine. It was as if the whispering had awakened an ancient entity, a creature of darkness that fed on fear and reveled in torment. Each time I passed near that desolate spot, the whispers would return, their insidious presence a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked beneath the surface. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers became more frequent, more menacing. They followed me wherever I went, not only in the confines of the mine but also in my waking hours. I would lie in bed, paralyzed by fear, as the whispers whispered secrets in my ear, taunting me with their knowledge of my deepest fears. My sleep became fragmented, haunted by vivid nightmares in which the whispers pursued me through an endless maze of darkness. I confided in my fellow workers, but they dismissed my fears as mere superstition, the product of an overactive imagination. Yet, deep down, I knew that what I had experienced was real, a chilling encounter with something otherworldly. Determined to confront my fears, I resolved to return to that dreaded spot, armed with nothing but a headlamp and a flickering hope that I could silence the whispers once and for all. As I approached the familiar pile of mining equipment, the whispering intensified, a cacophony of incoherent syllables that grated on my nerves. I took a deep breath and stepped into the darkness, my heart pounding in my chest. The whispers surrounded me, their voices now louder than ever before. They were no longer mere whispers but a chorus of torment, a symphony of fear that clawed at my sanity. Terror surged through my veins as I realized the futility of my endeavor. The whispers were not a product of my imagination but an embodiment of something ancient and malevolent. I turned and fled, stumbling through the darkness, the whispers chasing me every step of the way. As I emerged from the mine, gasping for breath, the sunlight seemed almost too bright, the world too vibrant. The whispers had subsided, but their echo lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the horrors I had witnessed. I never returned to that particular spot again, but the memory of the whispers remained etched in my mind. It was a secret I kept to myself, a chilling experience that I could never fully understand. And so, I continued to work in the coal mines, a solitary figure navigating the labyrinthine corridors, forever haunted by the whispers that whispered in the darkness. Years passed, and I eventually left the mining company, seeking solace in a different line of work. But the whispers never truly left me. They remained a constant companion, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beneath the surface of our world. And as the years turned into decades, I came to realize that the whispers were not merely a product of fear but a reflection of something more profound, something that connected me to the unseen realms that lie just beyond our comprehension. In the twilight of my life, I have chosen to share my story, not to elicit pity or fear but to serve as a testament to the strange and inexplicable forces that shape our lives. For the whispers in the darkness are real, and they are a reminder that there are things in the world that we cannot fully understand. The sun peeked through the verdant canopy of the forest, casting dappled patterns on the ground below. As I ambled through the familiar trails, the sound of my footsteps rustling against the fallen leaves filling the tranquil atmosphere. My mind was occupied with thoughts of the day ahead, unaware of the extraordinary discovery that awaited me. Suddenly, my foot caught on something solid beneath the layer of humus and leaves. I stumbled and fell forward, my hands instinctively reaching out to break my descent. As I lay there, dazed and disoriented, my fingers brushed against something cold and smooth. Curiosity replaced the initial shock as I began to excavate the object. With each handful of soil I removed, the shape and size of the object became clearer. It was a circular cement disc, its surface worn and partially covered in moss. A sense of intrigue washed over me. What could it be? An ancient artifact? A hidden treasure? The next day, I returned to the site, armed with a crowbar and a healthy dose of trepidation. I gripped the crowbar tightly and braced myself against the disc. With a heave, I pried it open, revealing a gaping hole in the ground. A wave of cold, stale air hit me as I peered into the darkness below. A musty, metallic scent permeated the air, reminding me of the forgotten remnants of the past. Curiosity and a sense of unease gnawed at me, demanding exploration. I cautiously lowered myself into the hole, my heart pounding in my chest. The descent was short, landing me in a small, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with shelves and wires, and the floor was covered in a thick layer of slime. As my eyes adjusted to the dimness, I noticed strange markings etched into the walls. The words were frantic, desperate, filled with a sense of despair and impending doom. "This is the end," one message read. "We must die," another proclaimed. A chill ran down my spine as I continued to explore the chamber. In one corner, I found a small metal box. Its surface was covered in rust, and the lock had been broken. Curiosity got the better of me, and I opened it to reveal a stack of papers. The papers were filled with handwritten notes, each page a fragment of a larger story. They spoke of a group of people who had taken refuge in this underground bunker during a war. They had faced starvation, disease, and the horrors of the outside world. As I delved deeper into the writings, the darkness and despair that had consumed the bunker's inhabitants became palpable. They had lost hope, they had turned on each other, and they had ultimately met a grim fate. At the very back of the chamber, I discovered a large, red scrawl that sent a shock of terror through me. "Get the fuck out of my home." The words were written in blood, their jagged edges and furious strokes a testament to the desperation of their author. Enough, I whispered to myself, the fear in my voice echoing through the chamber. I'm getting out of here. I retreated to the hole and scrambled back up into the forest. As I closed the cement disc behind me, I couldn't shake the feeling of having stumbled upon something truly sinister. I had seen the horrors that had unfolded within those walls, and I knew that I could never return. As I walked away from the site, I glanced back at the burned-out remnants of the bunker. The fire had consumed the structure, erasing any physical evidence of its existence. But the memories of what I had seen lingered in my mind, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface. Time passed, and I tried to put the experience behind me. But the nightmares persisted, transporting me back to the underground chamber, surrounded by the desperate pleas and the macabre writings of its former occupants. One day, I decided to revisit the site of the bunker. I wanted to see if there was anything left, anything that could shed light on the fate of its inhabitants. To my astonishment, the bunker had been completely excavated. A group of workers were busy removing the debris, preparing the site for construction. I approached the workers and asked them what had happened. They told me that a development company had purchased the land and was planning to build a condominium complex on the site. They had discovered the bunker during the excavation process and had hired a team to remove it safely. I thanked the workers and turned away, a sense of sadness overcoming me. The bunker was gone, the memories of its inhabitants scattered to the wind. But the scar it had left on my mind would never fully disappear. I walked away from the construction site, the weight of the past still heavy on my shoulders. The doorway to darkness had been sealed forever, but the shadows it cast would continue to haunt me for years to come. I found myself traversing the desolate wastelands of the Navajo Nation. Mile after relentless mile, I journeyed alone, the only companion the rhythmic beat of my heart echoing through the silence. I was a stranger in this foreign land, a lone white man venturing beyond the confines of his known world. Curiosity had led me down this path, a desire to glimpse a culture shrouded in myth and legend. But as I delved deeper into the heart of the Navajo territory, a sense of unease began to creep into my soul. The landscape shifted beneath my feet, transforming from arid mesas into rugged canyons carved by centuries of erosion. As darkness enveloped the land, casting eerie shadows, I felt a knot of apprehension tighten within me. The isolation of my surroundings weighed heavily upon my mind. Driven by a mix of trepidation and determination, I pressed onward. It was shortly after nightfall when I stumbled upon the settlement of Kinlichi, nestled amidst the towering sandstone cliffs. Hunger gnawed at my stomach, and I longed for the sanctuary of human contact. As I approached the outskirts of the settlement, I noticed a glow emanating from one of the hogans. It beckoned me like a moth to a flame, offering respite from the cold and solitude. With cautious steps, I drew closer. The aroma of burning juniper filled the air, carrying with it a scent of ancient rituals. I hesitated at the entrance to the hogan, feeling an inexplicable pull towards its depths. Summoning my courage, I lifted the curtain and stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by the flickering flames of a small fire. In the center of the hogan, on a bed of soft furs, lay the body of an elderly woman. Her face was serene, her body draped in colorful blankets. A group of mourners stood silently around the body, their heads bowed in sorrow. They were dressed in traditional Navajo clothing, their faces painted with red and black designs. As I entered, they turned their gazes towards me, their eyes filled with suspicion and hostility. Fear gripped my heart as I realized my mistake. I had stumbled into a funeral, a sacred ceremony reserved only for members of the Navajo tribe. In my unwitting intrusion, I had committed a grave offense. "You are not welcome here," one of the mourners growled in a low voice. "This is a place of mourning. Leave immediately." I stumbled backward, desperate to escape their wrath. As I turned to flee, I tripped and fell, my hands coming into contact with the cold, unyielding body on the ground. A surge of icy terror coursed through my veins. The woman's eyes flickered open, and a malevolent gaze met my own. Her lips parted, and a guttural whisper filled the air. You have profaned my sacred burial. You will pay a heavy price." With a sudden burst of energy, the woman rose from her bed, her body animated by an unseen force. Her eyes blazed with an otherworldly fire, and her claws extended like those of a ravenous beast. The mourners erupted in chaos, fleeing in terror as the possessed woman lunged at me. I screamed and dodged her grasp, stumbling backward until I fell against the wall of the hogan. Cornered and desperate, I reached for my hiking stick, a feeble weapon against the supernatural force that confronted me. As the woman advanced, I raised the stick and struck out with all my might. The stick connected with a sickening thud, but it had no effect on the undead creature. Its body seemed to absorb the blow, and it continued to pursue me relentlessly. In a final act of desperation, I hurled the stick into the fire, hoping to burn the evil spirit. To my horror, the flames parted like a curtain, leaving the stick untouched. Trapped and out of options, I closed my eyes and waited for the inevitable. But the creature did not attack. Instead, it stood over me, its glowing eyes boring into my soul. "You will be punished," the woman whispered again. "Your soul will be lost forever." As the words left her mouth, the creature disappeared, leaving me alone in the darkness. Trembling with fear, I stumbled to my feet and fled the hogan. The mourners had vanished without a trace, and the settlement was eerily silent. I ran for hours, my lungs burning and my legs aching. I did not stop until I had put miles of desolate wasteland between me and the cursed hogan. As the sun rose, I stumbled into a small town on the outskirts of the Navajo Nation. I was met with disbelief and horror when I told my tale. The townsfolk whispered about me, calling me the Cursed One. Haunted by my experience, I have chosen to share my story as a warning to others. Respect the sacred customs and traditions of the Navajo people, for the consequences of profaning their beliefs can be dire. And always, be wary of the unseen forces that may lurk beyond the veil of reality. Amidst the towering pines and murmuring streams of the sacred Apache territory, a chilling text message pierced the tranquility of my phone. The words ignited a surge of trepidation within me. "I can prove the paranormal is real." A sense of unease washed over me as I grappled with the implications of this cryptic message. Could it be a prank, a hoax? Or was there something more sinister lurking beneath its surface? My curiosity overcame my fear, and I arranged to meet the sender at a secluded campsite nestled in the heart of the wilderness. As dusk descended, I arrived at the campsite, my heart pounding in my chest. A flickering campfire cast eerie shadows across the ancient trees, and the night air crackled with anticipation. I anxiously scanned my surroundings, waiting for the unknown to reveal itself. Suddenly, a rustling sound emanated from the dense undergrowth. My eyes widened in alarm as a tall, imposing figure emerged from the shadows. The stranger was adorned in traditional Apache clothing, his face hidden behind a beaded mask. He extended a gnarled hand towards me. "You have come seeking proof," the stranger whispered in a deep, raspy voice. "And I shall provide it." With a wave of his hand, a cloud of thick, impenetrable smoke enveloped the campsite. The air grew heavy with the scent of burning sage and the eerie chanting of ancient Apache spirits. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine as the smoke swirled around me, cloaking my senses in a disorienting haze. Time seemed to warp and distort as the smoke dance continued. Images flickered in my mind, visions of shadowy figures lurking in the trees, disembodied voices whispering in the wind. The boundaries between reality and the supernatural blurred until I questioned my own sanity. Suddenly, the smoke cleared, and a chilling sight met my eyes. The stranger had disappeared, replaced by a writhing mass of grotesque, otherworldly creatures. Their eyes burned with an unholy fire, and their twisted bodies contorted in impossible ways. A wave of terror crashed over me as the creatures surged towards me. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape their clutches. But my legs felt heavy, as if bound by invisible chains. Just when all hope seemed lost, a faint sound caught my attention. It was the rhythmic beat of a drum, coming from the depths of the forest. The sound grew louder, accompanied by the haunting melody of a Native American chant. As if drawn by an irresistible force, I stumbled towards the music, my body moving of its own accord. As I approached the source of the chanting, I realized that I was in a secluded clearing. A group of Apache elders stood in a circle, their bodies adorned with intricate paint and feathers. They were performing a sacred ceremony, their voices rising in a mournful cry. In the flickering light of the ceremonial fire, I saw the stranger again. He stood at the edge of the circle, his mask now removed. His face was that of an ancient man, his eyes filled with both wisdom and sorrow. He reached out to me, and I felt a surge of unexpected peace. "You have witnessed the paranormal," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "But know this, it is a dangerous path to tread. The spirits are powerful, and they will not hesitate to harm those who do not respect their ways." As the ceremony concluded, the stranger vanished once more. The elders led me back to the campsite, their faces solemn. They warned me that what I had seen was real, but also that it was dangerous. They urged me to keep the secret of my experience buried deep within my heart. And so, I returned to my own world, forever changed by what I had witnessed. The paranormal was real, but it was a force to be feared and respected. And as the years passed, I found myself longing for the peace and wisdom I had experienced in the company of the Apache elders, knowing that the true secrets of the supernatural lay not in fear, but in the ancient traditions and beliefs of my ancestors. I had wandered off the beaten path, lured by a curiosity that tingled like a whisper in my ears. A dilapidated hut stood isolated, its weather-beaten facade a silent testament to time's relentless march. Intrigued, I approached cautiously, my senses heightened by a mix of trepidation and fascination. A slight creak greeted me as I crossed the rotting porch, followed by a musty odor that clung to the air like a shroud. The door was ajar, inviting me into an abyss of shadows. With trembling hands, I pushed my way inside, a shiver running down my spine as my eyes adjusted to the dimness. Dust danced in the faint light, illuminating cobwebs that hung like macabre tapestries. The room was bare, save for a few broken pieces of furniture and a hearth choked with ashes. As I explored further, my fingers brushed against something cold and metallic. I gasped and jumped back, my heart pounding like a drum. It was a key, lying forgotten on a crumbling windowsill. A strange fascination pulled me towards it, and I picked it up, its icy touch sending shivers through my body. Curiosity got the better of me, and I found myself drawn to the back of the hut. A locked door, covered in layers of grime, stood at the end of a narrow hallway. The key in my hand seemed to fit perfectly, its clicks echoing through the silence like the tolling of a death knell. With a mix of trepidation and morbid curiosity, I turned the key and pushed open the door. A blast of cold air hit me, carrying with it a pungent stench that made my eyes water. I stumbled inside, my flashlight cutting through the darkness, revealing a scene that made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in eerie scribbles, a man's ranting scrawled in blood and charcoal. Dismembered animal parts littered the floor, their empty eyes staring up at me accusingly. The stench of decay permeated the air, a sickening reminder of the horrors that had unfolded within these walls. But what truly chilled me to the bone was a single human skull, perched on top of a dusty bookcase. Its eye sockets seemed to glow with a malevolent light, its teeth bared in a silent scream. A wave of nausea washed over me, and I stumbled backward, desperately trying to escape the nightmare. As I reached for the door, I felt an icy hand grip my ankle. I let out a terrified scream as a force dragged me back into the room. My flashlight fell from my grasp, plunging me into darkness. Panic consumed me as I clawed and fought, but my efforts were futile. My body was swept up by an unseen entity, my protest swallowed by the yawning abyss. I felt myself melting into the darkness, my consciousness fading like a dying ember. And then, I was alone, lost in a realm of eternal night, haunted by the horrors I had witnessed. The hut stood as a silent guardian of my stolen sanity, a testament to the dangers that lurked in the shadows, a chilling reminder that some things are better left untouched. To this day, the memory of that night haunts me, a perpetual reminder of the darkness that can reside in the human heart. I know now that some secrets are better left buried, and some doors are meant to remain forever closed. And so, I carried the scars of my experience, a cautionary tale I whisper to myself whenever temptation beckons me to stray from the light. For people shouldn't take what doesn't belong to them, lest they too become lost in the abyss of stolen shadows. I received the call. My grandfather, who had been battling a long illness, was nearing the end. I packed my bags and drove through the night to reach his remote cabin in the woods. Upon arriving, I found him lying in bed, frail and weak, but his eyes were bright with a sense of urgency. He beckoned me closer, and with a raspy voice, he began to speak. "I have a confession to make, my dear grandson," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "A secret that has haunted me for decades." I leaned in, intrigued and concerned. Many years ago, when I was a young man, I stumbled upon a hidden path in these very woods. It led me to a clearing where I found a strange, ancient stone circle. I was drawn to it, and as I approached, I heard whispers on the wind. He paused, his breath shallow and labored. The whispers spoke of a great power, a power that could grant any wish. I was young and foolish, and I believed them. I made a wish, and the stone circle granted it. But at what cost? His eyes filled with tears, and I could see the weight of his guilt. The price was my own happiness. From that day forward I was cursed. Every time I found joy, it was snatched away. Every time I found love, it was taken from me. And now, as I lie here on my deathbed, I am finally free of the curse. I was stunned, unsure of how to respond. "But there's more," he continued, his voice growing weaker. "The stone circle still exists, and the curse remains. You must find it and destroy it, or else the cycle will continue." With those final words, my grandfather closed his eyes and slipped away. The next day, I set out to find the stone circle. I wandered through the woods, following the faint whispers that seemed to guide me. As I approached the clearing, I could feel a strange energy emanating from the stones. I stepped into the circle, and the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They begged me to make a wish, to take the power for myself. But I remembered my grandfather's warning and refused. Instead, I raised my hands and called upon the power of the circle, asking it to release its hold on the world. A brilliant light erupted from the stones, and the circle began to crumble. As the last stone fell, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. The curse was broken, and the woods seemed to sigh in relief. From that day forward, I have lived a life free of the curse that plagued my grandfather. But I will never forget the lessons he taught me, the dangers of greed, the importance of family, and the power of love to overcome even the darkest of curses. And so, I share this story with you, dear reader, as a warning and a reminder. Be careful what you wish for, and always remember the power of love and family. For in the end, they are the true sources of happiness and strength. My heart pounded with a relentless rhythm, my breaths coming in shallow gasps as I witnessed something both horrifying and utterly unnatural. My once beloved daughter, Amelia, stood over the bathtub, her small form consumed by a malevolent aura. The cat, our sweet old Tabby, was submerged in the cold water, its tiny body struggling weakly. Its desperate meows were silenced by the deafening splash of water as Amelia ruthlessly held it beneath the surface. I couldn't believe my eyes. This wasn't my sweet, innocent child. The expression on her face was twisted, her eyes blazing with an unholy light as she watched the life slipping away from the helpless animal. It was as if a demonic force had possessed her, turning her into a monster. "Amelia, stop!" I screamed, but my pleas fell on deaf ears. Her movements were deliberate, calculated, as if she were performing some unholy ritual. I lunged forward, desperate to save the poor creature, but Amelia's grip tightened and the cat's cries grew louder. Fear consumed me as I struggled to free the cat, but my efforts were futile. Amelia's strength seemed superhuman, and her eyes burned with a hatred I had never witnessed before. It was as if her true nature had been revealed, a hidden darkness that had been unleashed. With a guttural growl, Amelia pulled the cat from the water and slammed it against the wall. I watched in horror as its tiny body shattered into a bloody pulp. The impact sent shards of bone and tissue everywhere, leaving a grotesque mess on the floor. Amelia stood there, her face expressionless, her eyes still burning with that malevolent light. She turned to me, and in that moment I saw the true extent of her transformation. Her face had become contorted, her skin pale as death, and her eyes had turned a piercing red. "Amelia," I whispered, my voice trembling, "what have you done?" She stared at me with a blank expression, her voice raspy and devoid of emotion. "I have chosen my side," she hissed. "And it is not with you." A wave of terror washed over me as I realized that my daughter was no longer the innocent child I had raised. She had somehow become corrupted by an evil force, and I had no idea how to save her. "Don't do this, Amelia," I pleaded. "I'm your mother. I love you." She laughed, a cruel and heartless sound that chilled me to the bone. "You loved me," she corrected. "But now, there is only darkness." With that, she disappeared, leaving me alone in the blood-stained bathroom. The cat's shattered body lay on the floor, a testament to the horrors that had just unfolded. I staggered out of the house, driven by a mix of fear and desperation. As I stumbled through the darkness, I couldn't shake the feeling that a piece of me had died with Amelia. My sweet, innocent daughter was gone, replaced by a monster that I no longer recognized. The future seemed uncertain, a terrifying void filled with unknown horrors. And as the night wore on, I couldn't help but wonder if the darkness that had consumed Amelia would one day consume me too. I received the chilling news that sent shivers down my spine. My elderly father, who had been diagnosed with dementia, had gone missing. 6 miles from home, the police found him. But what they discovered that night was far from the truth. My father's body bore no signs of injury or foul play, yet his eyes held a haunting, unfamiliar expression. As I stood over his lifeless form, I felt a cold shiver run through me. His skin was pale and clammy, and his mouth hung slightly agape, as if he had been frozen in a silent scream. The police ruled his death as a mystery, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to it than met the eye. Determined to uncover the truth, I embarked on a perilous journey into the darkness that lay within my father's shattered mind. I delved into his old journals and found cryptic entries that hinted at a haunting secret. He had written about a strange presence that had haunted him for years, a presence that had lured him away from the safety of his home. One by one, I interviewed his neighbors and friends, desperate for any clue that could lead me to the truth. They recounted unsettling stories of strange encounters and unexplainable events that had occurred near his house. As I pieced together the fragments of my father's shattered memory, a chilling realization dawned upon me. The menacing entity that had stalked him was not just a figment of his dementia-addled mind, it was real. Driven by an insatiable curiosity mingled with terror, I decided to venture into the forbidden realm where my father had vanished. I followed his footsteps into a dark and tangled forest that lay behind his home. The trees twisted and writhed like gnarled old hands, their branches clawing at the sky like skeletal fingers. As I pushed through the dense undergrowth, a heavy sensation of dread hung in the air. Suddenly, I heard a faint whisper that seemed to echo from the depths of the forest. It was a soft, sibilant sound, like the rustling of leaves in a strong wind. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I took a deep breath and turned cautiously towards the sound. There, in the dim light of the moon, I saw it. The ghastly figure stood on the edge of the clearing, its body shrouded in darkness. Its eyes gleamed with an otherworldly glow, and its mouth was twisted into a cruel grin. I knew then that I was in the presence of something truly evil. It was the entity that had haunted my father, and now it had come for me. Frozen with terror, I could only watch as the creature slowly approached. Its gait was unnatural, as if it were gliding across the ground. I tried to scream, but no sound came out of my throat. Just when I thought all hope was lost, a bright light pierced through the darkness. A small group of hikers had stumbled upon the scene and were shining their flashlights directly at the creature. With a piercing shriek, the entity vanished into the night, leaving behind an acrid stench and a chilling reminder of its presence. I never learned what truly happened to my father in those final moments, but I knew that he had been the victim of something sinister beyond our comprehension. And as the sun rose, casting a faint glimmer of hope over the horrors I had witnessed, I could feel the darkness that still lingered in the wake of that fateful night. To this day, I am haunted by the memories of that night, and the terrifying realization that there are things in this world that we are not meant to know. The darkness that lurks beneath the surface of everyday life is more real and terrifying than we could ever imagine. It was a night that would forever etch itself into my memory, a chilling testament to the horrors that lurk beneath the veil of normalcy. I lived alone in a modest apartment, a sanctuary I had always considered safe. But on that fateful night, as I prepared for bed, an unsettling feeling crawled upon me. The air grew heavy with an oppressive silence, broken only by the rhythmic tick of the clock. As I lay down on my pillow, my body tensed. My senses heightened, every creak and groan of the apartment magnified in my mind. I closed my eyes, desperately trying to find solace in slumber, but a muffled sound from outside my door shattered my tranquility. Fear coursed through my veins as footsteps approached, tentative at first, then growing louder and closer. My heart pounded like a drum in my chest as the handle of my door slowly turned. With bated breath, I watched in horror as the door creaked open a sliver, revealing a figure shrouded in darkness. Its breath came in shallow gasps, and its eyes flickered with an eerie, predatory light. The figure took a step into my room, its presence casting an icy chill upon my skin. I huddled in my bed, unable to move or speak. Time seemed to slow to a crawl as the figure advanced, its every step deliberate and menacing. It reached out a skeletal hand towards me, its long, claw-like fingernails scraping against the wall. A guttural whisper escaped its lips, a chilling invitation to join it in the abyss. In a desperate attempt to break free from my paralysis, I screamed, but my voice was met with an oppressive silence. The figure leaned closer, its fetid breath tickling my ear. Its eyes bore into mine, a reflection of my own terror. As darkness enveloped me, I knew I had fallen into a trap, a nightmare from which there was no escape. The figure's icy embrace tightened, dragging me into a void where all hope extinguished. In the depths of despair, I reached out for something, anything, to pull me back from the precipice of oblivion. Suddenly, a faint flickering light pierced the darkness, a beacon of sanity in the maelstrom. With renewed vigor, I fought against the force pulling me down, kicking and clawing at the unseen entity. Finally, I broke free from its clutches, stumbling to my feet. The figure let out an anguished howl, its form dissolving into nothingness. As the light grew stronger, I realized I was standing in the center of my room, alone and trembling. The door remained open, a silent reminder of the horror I had just experienced. Dawn was breaking, casting a pale, ethereal glow upon the scene. As I surveyed the wreckage of my shattered sanity, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister still lingered, dormant for now but waiting to strike again. I had survived that night, but the scars remained. The line between sleep and wakefulness blurred, and every creak in my apartment echoed with the memory of that nightmarish encounter. The once familiar sanctuary of my home had become a haunted prison, a constant reminder of the horrors that could lurk in the shadows. And so, I learned the hard way: never fall asleep when danger lurks unseen. For in the realm of darkness, the boundaries of reality distort, and the most terrifying nightmares take on a life of their own. The call came from a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end sent shivers down my spine. "Mr. Carter," the caller said, "my name is Detective Banks. I understand you were a witness to the gruesome murder of Emily Carter 10 years ago." My heart skipped a beat. Emily was my sister, her brutal death a haunting memory I had tried to bury deep within me. "Yes," I managed to say, my voice trembling. "We're conducting a reenactment of the crime scene, Mr. Carter," the detective said. "We believe it could help us catch the killer who has eluded us for so long." Reluctance gnawed at me, but a sense of duty prevailed. I agreed to participate. The next day, I found myself at my childhood home, a once familiar place now imbued with a sinister aura. The police had cordoned off the front yard where Emily had been found. I walked towards the spot where her body had lain, each step echoing the weight of that fateful night. As I approached, I noticed a girl sitting on the ground, head in hands. "Jessica?" I asked, recognizing my niece's name. She looked up, her eyes red from crying. "Uncle Daniel," she said, "I can't believe you're here." "I just want to help find the person who did this," I said. Jessica nodded. "Emily always talked about how close you two were." I took her hand in mine and squeezed it gently. "I miss her every day," I said. The detective approached us, along with other officers and technicians. He explained the reenactment process, assuring us that it would be as realistic as possible but emphasizing the safety precautions. I was placed at the spot where I had first discovered Emily's body. As the scene unfolded, actors portrayed the other witnesses and the killer. The reenactment was chillingly accurate. I witnessed firsthand the terror and helplessness Emily must have felt that night. The actors' performances were so lifelike that it felt as if I were reliving the nightmare again. As the reenactment reached its climax, the killer lunged towards the victim on the ground. Time seemed to slow down as I watched the scene unfold in horror. Suddenly, a piercing scream echoed through the night. Jessica had broken away from my grip and was running towards the actors. "No!" she shouted. "Stop it!" The officers rushed to restrain her, but Jessica was hysterical. "He's the one," she cried, pointing at one of the actors. "I saw him that night." The police questioned Jessica frantically, and to our astonishment, she provided a detailed description of the masked figure she had witnessed fleeing the scene 10 years ago. The actor in question was immediately detained for questioning. As the police car drove away, I couldn't help but feel a bittersweet mix of horror and relief. After all these years, Emily's killer had finally been apprehended. The reenactment had not only helped us solve the case but had also given us a chance to confront the past and find some measure of closure. In the aftermath, I couldn't shake the memories of that night. The haunting reenactment and Jessica's revelation had brought Emily's murder too vividly back to life. But alongside the pain, there was also a sense of gratitude. Emily's case had been cold for so long, and I never thought we would find justice. The reenactment had reignited the investigation and given us the closure we had longed for. And so, as the years went by, the reenactment became a bittersweet reminder of the tragic loss of my sister but also a testament to the enduring power of memory and the unyielding pursuit of justice. It was a dark and stormy night, the kind that makes you want to curl up under a blanket with a good book and a cup of hot cocoa. But I wasn't in the mood for either. I was restless, and the storm outside only seemed to amplify my unease. I decided to take a bath to relax, hoping the warm water would soothe my nerves. As I filled the tub, I glanced at the mirror hanging on the bathroom wall. It was an antique, passed down from my grandmother, and it always gave me a strange feeling. But tonight, it seemed to beckon me, as if it held some dark secret. I shook off the feeling and stepped into the tub, sinking into the warm water. I closed my eyes, letting the steam and heat wash over me. But as I lay there, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I opened my eyes and glanced at the mirror. There, in the reflection, I saw a shadowy figure standing behind me. My heart raced, and I quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. I chalked it up to my overactive imagination and closed my eyes again, trying to relax. But the feeling of being watched persisted, and I couldn't shake the sense that something was terribly wrong. I decided to get out of the tub and investigate. As I stood up, I caught a glimpse of the shadowy figure again in the mirror. This time, it seemed to be moving, creeping closer to me. I turned around, but there was still nothing there. I grabbed a towel and wrapped it around myself, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to confront whatever was lurking in the mirror. I took a deep breath and stepped closer to the glass, staring into the reflection. The shadowy figure was now standing right behind me, its face obscured by darkness. I reached out to touch the mirror, and as my fingers made contact, the figure lunged forward, its face now visible. It was a horrifying sight, a twisted, grotesque visage that seemed to be a mix of human and something else entirely. I screamed and stumbled backward, tripping over the edge of the tub and landing hard on the floor. The figure in the mirror laughed, a chilling, otherworldly sound that echoed through the bathroom. I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I had to get out of the bathroom, but the door was locked, and I couldn't find the key. I was trapped, with the shadowy figure in the mirror watching my every move. I tried to reason with it, to plead with it to leave me alone. But the figure only laughed, its twisted face contorting into an even more horrifying expression. I knew I had to act fast. I grabbed a nearby candle and held it up to the mirror, hoping to break the glass and free myself from the figure's grasp. As I swung the candle, the glass shattered, and the figure disappeared. I collapsed to the floor, my heart racing and my body trembling. I knew I had just experienced something truly terrifying, something that would haunt me for the rest of my life. From that day on, I never looked at the mirror the same way again. I covered it with a cloth, hoping to forget the horrifying experience. But every time I closed my eyes, I could still see the shadowy figure lurking in the reflection, waiting for its next victim. And so, I learned to live with the fear, to accept that some things in this world are beyond our understanding. But I also learned to be more careful, to trust my instincts, and to never underestimate the power of the unknown. For in the end, it's the things we can't see that often hold the greatest power over us. And sometimes, all it takes is a glance in the mirror to remind us of that. In the attic's dusty recesses, where forgotten memories lay dormant, I stumbled upon a weathered cassette tape. Its faded label hinted at a past long-buried curiosity's cruel fate. A perverse curiosity gnawed at me as I cautiously inserted the tape into the aging player. As the tape whirred to life, a voice crackled through the speakers, its tone both familiar and chilling. It was my own, recorded years ago. A shiver ran down my spine as I heard my younger self narrate a tale that sent icy fingers down my memory's spine. I described a fateful afternoon when I ventured into a dilapidated mansion on the outskirts of town. Despite warnings from the locals who whispered tales of sinister occurrences, I was drawn in by a morbid fascination. With trembling hands, I pushed open the creaking front door. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of dust-laden hallways and shadowy rooms. As I explored, an oppressive silence enveloped me, broken only by the faint creak of floorboards beneath my feet. Suddenly, my flashlight flickered and died, plunging me into darkness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the light's switch. In the pitch black, I could feel the weight of unseen eyes upon me, their presence palpable in the suffocating atmosphere. Frantically, I reached out and grabbed a nearby piece of furniture for support. As my fingers brushed against cold, smooth wood, a piercing shriek echoed through the hallway, bouncing off the walls and setting my heart pounding like a drum. I screamed back in terror and stumbled backward, tripping over something on the floor. As I lay there, writhing in agony, an eerie silence descended once more. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I slowly lifted my head and froze. In the dim light emanating from a single flickering light bulb at the end of the hallway, I saw it. A figure, shrouded in darkness, its eyes glowing an unnatural crimson, stood motionless at the end of the hallway. Its malevolent gaze seemed to bore into my soul, paralyzing me with terror. I tried to scream, but no sound escaped my lips. Its eyes flared brighter, casting an eerie glow upon its distorted features. The figure slowly moved forward, its footsteps barely audible. As it drew closer, I could see its grotesque face contorted in a sinister smile. Fear consumed me as I desperately tried to break free from its hypnotic gaze, but it was too late. The figure reached out its long, skeletal fingers and touched my forehead. A jolt of unimaginable pain coursed through my body, and my vision went black. When my consciousness returned, I was lying on the cold stone floor, alone in the darkness. The tape player lay shattered nearby, its whirring long since silenced. I scrambled to my feet and ran from that cursed mansion, never daring to look back. As I replayed that nightmarish tape, I was filled with both terror and remorse. I had recklessly ignored the warnings, driven by a curiosity that had led me down a path of unspeakable horror. Now, years later, the echoes of that night haunted me, a reminder of the folly of my youthful recklessness. And so, the forgotten tape served as a chilling testament to the dangers that lurk in the shadows, waiting for the unwary to stumble into their grasp. As I packed the tape away, I resolved to forever keep its contents locked in the depths of my memory, a haunting echo of the day curiosity's cruel fate claimed its hold. As the crimson hues of dusk cast a sinister glow upon the desolate landscape, I arrived at my retreat. The air was thick with the musky scent of pine needles and the eerie chirping of crickets. I parked my truck and made my way to the creaking porch, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. As I swung open the heavy wooden door, a blast of icy air greeted me, carrying with it the unsettling scent of decay. Dust motes danced in the dim light filtering through the dusty windows, casting grotesque shadows on the bare walls. The fireplace had long gone cold, its blackened stone hearth mocking my memory of cozy winter nights. I shivered as I turned on the flickering lights, their feeble glow casting more shadows than they dispelled. The silence of the cabin was deafening, broken only by the odd creak of the floorboards beneath my feet. I made my way to the bedroom, its walls adorned with peeling wallpaper that seemed to writhe in the dim light. As I lay in bed, the silence pressed down upon me like a suffocating blanket. My mind raced, conjuring up images of the cabin's forgotten past. Rumors had circulated among the locals of a dark history associated with the dwelling, but I had never given them much credence. However, as the hours passed, I began to question my skepticism. The air grew heavy with an oppressive presence that seemed to permeate every fiber of my being. Footsteps echoed through the empty halls, and whispers floated from unseen corners. The wind rattled the window panes, each gust sounding like the desperate wail of a tormented soul. I tossed and turned, tormented by fear. The darkness seemed to close in on me, suffocating me with its oppressive weight. And then, amidst the chaos, I heard it, a low, guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. It came from the closet, a deep, animalistic sound that reverberated through the room. I slowly slid out of bed and peered into the darkness. Two glowing eyes met mine, piercing the gloom with their malevolent intensity. Frozen in terror, I watched as a shadowy figure emerged from the closet. It was tall and skeletal, its body covered in a tattered shroud. Its face was obscured by a torn veil, but its eyes burned with a fiery rage that seemed to consume my soul. The creature advanced towards me, its footsteps silent as a phantom. Panic surged through me as I stumbled backwards, desperate to escape its clutches. I fumbled for the light switch, but my fingers fumbled uselessly in the darkness. As the creature drew closer, its foul breath washed over me, carrying the stench of decay. Its icy claws grazed my skin, sending waves of terror through my body. I screamed, but my voice was drowned out by the howling wind and crashing thunder. In a moment of desperation, I grabbed a nearby lamp and hurled it at the creature. It shattered against its body, but the creature remained unmoved. Instead, it bared its teeth in a gruesome grin, revealing rows of razor-sharp fangs. I knew then that I was doomed. The creature lunged forward, its claws tearing into my flesh. I felt a sharp, burning pain as it sank its fangs into my neck, its fetid breath fogging my vision. As darkness enveloped me, I realized that I had been a fool to seek solace in this accursed cabin. It was not a sanctuary but a prison of madness, haunted by the horrors of a forgotten past. And now, I had become a part of its macabre history.